Good morning. Today we're going to talk about reproduction. Okay. You know that at the beginning of creation, God created living things according to their kind. This is another way to say that when a dog reproduces, you expect him to have puppies. If a cat reproduces, you expect him to have kittens. Or if a peach tree reproduces, you expect peaches and more peach trees, right? So living things produce their own kind year after year. It's not that the dog's gonna have a puppy and then the next year a puppy and then a cat. What? No, it's always a puppy, right? And it's the same with humans. Humans have human babies. And we get our characteristics or traits from our parents, like eye colors or hair color or skin color. We inherit it from our parents. And the same happens with plants and animals. So the offspring, like the babies, have the same characteristics as the parents. Genetics, it's the scientific study of heredity. So it's the passing on of characteristics of one living organism to the next generation. Okay? For the vocabulary, today it's long, but be patient with me. Just a review of the plants that we learned before. Okay. So anther, that's the upper portion of the stamen over here, which contains pollen grain. This is where pollen usually is. Oh, wait. Okay. Then we have cross-pollination or pollination. Okay. That means when pollen goes from the anther of one flower to the stigma of a different flower. Okay. Usually helped by insects and birds or bees. Then we have egg cell. Egg cell, you can see it over here inside this flower. It's a female reproductive cell in a plant or animal, but in this case, it's in a plant. And then embryo, that's the undeveloped stage of a plant or animal. For example, here you have a seed, and then you have an embryo, would be like a baby plant. Fertilization. Fertilization, it's the union of a male reproductive cell and a female reproductive cell, and it forms a cell that will develop into a new individual. For example, here, pollen would be the male cell, then the egg cell would be the female cell. They get together and they form a new cell that forms a seed, that forms a plant. Filament, remember that we learned that the anther is that part that has the pollen. Then the filament is like this stalk that holds it up. Genetics, that's the science of heredity. And then germinator, it's something that's starting to grow or develop, that it's sprouting, just like this picture. Ovary, the ovary, it's the enlarged lower part of a pistil, and it's the reproductive organ that produces egg cells. So the ovary, it's this part here. I'm gonna make a big drawing, okay? And it has egg cells that you already know what they are, and it keeps them safe. That's why it's important, okay? Then ovule, sorry, that's my alarm, sorry. Okay, so an ovule, it's a part of a plant that develops into a seed found in the ovary of the flower over here inside here, okay? Pistil, the pistil, and let me here, it's the entire female part of the flower. So all of this part that we find here, it's the pistil. Pollen, that's like a powdery grain, usually yellow, on the stamen, and inside the pollen there are these sperm cells. And then receptacle, it's this part here. It's a stalk which holds a flower. And when we talk about reproduction, that's the process by which cells produce new cells like themselves, or by which an organism produces an offspring. So you get a baby. Self-pollination happens when pollen goes from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower. Okay, so you don't need more than one flower. Sepal, it's like kind of looks like a leaf part. But it's, how I explain it? Okay, so it's like a leaf-like part, and it's in the calyx of the flower. Then sperm cell, it's a male reproductive cell in a plant or animal. This is what it's inside pollen. Stamen, okay, so the stamen would be the male part of a flower. It's all of this. It's made of the anther and the filament. Okay, I'm gonna erase that. Okay. And then stigma. Okay, so when we're talking about the female part, okay, it's the top of the pistil of a flower. So these here would be the stigma here. Okay. And then the style, let me draw again. It's this tube that goes from the stigma to the ovary. That's the style. And, okay, let's talk reproduction. You know that flowers form seeds that will reproduce the flowering plant according to its own kind. So if you have a rose, it's gonna give you another rose. You have a geranium or a sunflower, it's gonna give you the same type of flower. The seed carries information about the plant in a tiny plant embryo. The information is coded, like it's written inside the cells of a new plant. The tiny plant is going to grow into a new plant that is going to look just like the parents, or really similar. Some plants are self-pollinated. That means that the stigma receives the pollen that it's made in its own flower, okay? And then in some cases we have cross-pollination, like I said before, that a flower receives the pollen from another flower that it's carried by wind or insects or by birds. When the pollen grain, and I'm going to draw a little bit here. Okay, when the pollen grain, wait. When the pollen grain lands in the stigma, remember, it comes from the anther or the anther of another flower. When it lands in the stigma, then it's going to grow a tube because it's sticky, okay? And it's going to grow a tube down the ovary. It needs a type of sugar to do it, okay? And then the pollen is going to get down this, the sperm cell, it's going to get down this tube and it's going to reach the egg cells, okay? And then they're going to unite the egg cell and the sperm cell, and they're gonna get together, and it's gonna happen something, fertilization. That means that they mix and a tiny new egg forms, an embryo. Okay, so that's a baby plant inside the ovary, and that ovule is gonna grow into a seed, and that seed it's gonna make another plant later. And then the plant embryo remains in the seed until it is planted in the soil. So when you have a seed is an embryo, a baby plant, and food for that baby plant. So you have to plant it, and then later, after the baby plant eats all of the seed, then it's gonna germinate and grow. The stigma, the style, the ovule, and the ovary are female parts, okay, of the plant called the pistil. So just to make sure, I'm gonna lead with red and blue so you remember, because we have talked about this before. Okay, so all of this part, the red part, it's female, and then all of this part, it's male. Okay, so I'm thinking that would be it for today. So I'm gonna stop sharing. Okay, that's it for